The Republicans have finished debating whether or not they will debate the SAVE Act. And I'm not exaggerating. They literally debated whether or not they would advance the bill in order to debate it. This is why Congress is completely useless. But where we are currently with the SAVE Act, it has advanced in the Senate, 51 to 48, meaning they will now begin a discussion over a week. They're going to propose amendments, maybe some changes. And then the presumption is it will ultimately fail because it will not meet the 60 vote threshold to get past the filibuster. And of course, Congress is wasting our time. But for those that aren't familiar, the SAVE Act is the most popular bill we have seen in this country in our lifetimes. Maybe not completely, I'm being a little hyperbolic, but it is enjoying 70+% support from Democrats, 80+% from independents, and 90+ from Republicans. So you have to wonder why, if the overall support across the board for the United States is over 85%, why aren't they passing this bill? I'm going to tell you, my friends, it's because Republicans and Democrats alike enjoy a system in which they can manipulate the elections to their own benefit. That's the reality. It's one big club and you ain't in it. It's the same club they used to beat you over the head with as they, declare war on foreign countries. That's a George Carlin quote for the most part. But we do have very interesting information that came out yesterday. We have this from the Gateway Pundit and supplementary reporting from Just the News, as well as new information pertaining to the SAVE Act. And that is, this is actually pretty dang crazy. Declassified documents confirm China did, in fact, breach U.S. election security leading up to the 2020 election. In fact, in the UK, they breached voter registration data. I don't know how that works in the UK, but of course, China is doing this. Now, I don't find this headline to be all that compelling, to be completely honest. And I know you may be saying, Tim, are you crazy? This is insane. Yes, but it is presumed. We have been discussing on this show and Timcast IRL for years how China has been waging cyber war against these United States. So this is not shocking to me in the least bit. The bigger question is, what did they do beyond this that we maybe cannot track? And more importantly, is there something bigger at play? And that is, if the Democrats, and I say Democrats, but really the Uniparty, have they been in cahoots with the CCP for some time? Well, my friends, I'm going to go ahead and say probably yes. One theory that I've had, or I should say hypothesis, because I don't necessarily believe it's completely true, but over the past 30 years, as we've watched our manufacturing base, much of our industry be sold off to China, I wondered if the expectation was that China is going to be the new place, basically. The place where the wealthy can hold their money, because what they refer to as the third way is it's an incredibly powerful way to control the population and mechanize humanity. That is, the system that we currently have relies on this election system, which does have its vulnerabilities to those in power, meaning people can get a Donald Trump elected. In China, however, yeah, that ain't going to happen. China is not necessarily communist. It's not necessarily capitalist. It's more like a regime machine that allows some freedom so that people don't completely lose their minds. The country doesn't completely stagnate, but yeah, it's basically a communist regime, a dictatorship and autocracy. There was this meeting that was had between Democrats and some members of the Chinese Communist Party where I can't remember exactly who it was. It might have been like Schumer or somebody. I could be wrong. I don't want to besmirch the good name of Schumer. But apparently, they were asking of the Chinese, like, how do we do what you do in America? Because, like, in China, they can build a highway like that. They will just bulldoze through people's homes and just be like, we don't care. We're doing what needs to be done for the efficiency of our nation. Well, in the United States, we have individual liberties and rights, so eminent domain, while possible, is much more difficult. So, of course, one hypothesis I had is that there's something called Thucydides' trap, which is, as a rising economic power is about to displace the dominant power, war tends to break out. In the past 16 instances historically that we've tracked, 12 wars have broken out. And the liberal economic order's play has always been about stopping World War III. And they do this through world policing and international trade. That's been the play since after World War II. Of course, we were competing with the Soviet Union, but we've crushed them. Or I should say they crushed them. I don't know, whatever. So now the question is what's happening with China's expansion a legitimate displacement of the United States, or is it a controlled collapse to prevent World War III? And the powers that be need only shuffle their money over to China, and they'll be rich forever. Donald Trump comes in and says, we're going to change that whole game. Well, here's a story from the Gateway Pundit. Before we get started, of course, my friends, if you haven't joined the Timcast Discord community, you are missing out. There are tens of thousands of people there hanging out, sharing stories, helping each other build things. And if you want to get involved, you go to timcast.com, you click join now, you get in that Discord server, my friends, where you will learn, you will teach, and you will have a lot of fun. There's early shows, morning shows, afternoon shows, evening shows. These guys, these people, they're all hanging out, doing an amazing job. And we don't always agree on everything. But that's the point. We want to build community because it is our strength. Support the work that we do here, timcast.com. Here's a story from the Gateway Pundit. They say, with Republicans working to pass the Save America Act in the Senate to safeguard election integrity, a new report out of Washington is highlighting a potential danger to American elections that Democrats don't want to talk about. And it turns out there's a good reason for that. Since it could cast a shadow over Joe Biden's victory in the 2020 vote that is never quite set right with the American right. Sat right? It's a danger that comes from the People's Republic of China, the United States' most dangerous enemy on the global stage. According to a document obtained by Just the News and confirmed with officials who had knowledge of the investigation, Beijing was able to electronically infiltrate unidentified American election systems as part of a cyber espionage campaign. Redacted Chinese intelligence officials analyzed multiple U.S. states' election voter registration data to conduct public opinion analysis of the 2020 U.S. general election. A portion of an April 2020 National Intelligence Council document stated. The memo, titled Cyber Operations Enabling Expansive Authoritarianism, was quietly declassified in 2022, but received no attention from either President Joe Biden's administration or from the establishment media. That means 6 years later, that the U.S. intelligence community has yet to fully inform the American people or the Congress on the breadth of evidence it possesses of Chinese actions, how Beijing got the data, and what operations it has taken or contemplated, wrote Just the News founder John Solomon and chief investigative correspondent Jerry Dunleavy. The information in question relates to voter registration, not actual voting systems. But that doesn't make it unimportant. Quote, voter registration data is not the same as ballots where Americans choose their candidates, Solomon and Dunleavy wrote, but it contains sensitive personally identifying information, including driver's license data and partial social security numbers. The data is considered so sensitive that several Democrat states are currently trying to keep the Trump Justice Department from obtaining it, and liberal groups claim it is a holy grail of election integrity. And who was the only intel official sounding serious warnings about Chinese activities? Trump's director of national intelligence in 2020, John Ratcliffe. Just a reminder, too, that President Joe Biden's administration made a big to-do about this sort of thing happening in the United Kingdom. From the Wall Street Journal, April of 2024, they said, the Biden administration hit alleged Chinese hackers with sanctions and criminal charges on Monday, while the British government accused Beijing of hacking UK's electoral register to steal the personal details of tens of millions of voters, part of a global push by allies to condemn China's expanding aggression in cyberspace. The alleged hackers, alongside 5 other defendants, were also indicted on criminal charges unsealed by the U.S. DOJ, and the U.S. State Department offered a $10 million reward for information about the group. The U.S. will continue its work to disrupt the dangerous and irresponsible actions of cyber actors targeting critical infrastructure, said Brian Nelson, a senior Treasury Department official. Through continued close coordination with our UK partners and a unified whole-of-government approach, we will protect our citizens from the catastrophic risks these reckless cyber activities pose. The UK's Electoral Commission, which manages elections, said last year that hackers had accessed the nation's voter registration records, which included the names and addresses of around 40 million people, as well as the Commission's email system and information about political donors. The hackers accessed the system in 2021, but were only detected in late 2022, the Commission said at the time. Why not go public with knowledge the Chinese government had also tried similar shenanigans in the U.S.? A charitable reading might be that we wouldn't want our adversaries to know what we know about them. A more uncharitable reading may be, 1, we were all supposed to pretend 2020 was the safest and most secure election ever. And 2, I know Trump wasn't the one who said it. This would have made the alleged Russian meddling in 2016, never proven beyond penny anti-hijinks, look piddling in comparison. Reading the memo, you realize this isn't what the Democrats handed Donald Trump the election 8 years ago, a handful of dodgy Moldovan fake news sites making claims like Hillary Clinton killed a man in Reno just to watch him die or whatever. Is that actually what they claimed? One of the accusations that was made about Russian meddling was that they'd spent a whopping $100,000 to promote on Facebook culture war stuff. I kid you not, $100,000. I mean, you may be saying, Tim, $100,000, that is a hefty sum of cash. Yeah, for one person maybe to live off for a year, Like, seriously, maybe you could stretch it for 2 years. Inflation kind of sucks. But for an operation to influence an election where they're spending like $4 or $5 billion in the country domestically, yeah, I'd be more worried about like an oil tycoon. And even then, that's like, well, at least it's an American, I guess. They say here we have a National Intelligence Council assessment from the heat of the 2020 election, confirming that China had wide swaths of voter data and was looking to export its cyber despotism beyond Beijing, Hong Kong, and Xinjiang and the like. That's kind of a big deal. And for 4 years, there were crickets from the Biden administration, all as the president was pushed around by a bellicose Xi Jinping. That's interesting. Remember when Joe Biden told us he was the defender of democracy? Well, that he was the only thing standing between America and real live despotism. So why then did he not talk about this with the American people? My friends, because it's all one big game. They accused Donald Trump of fraud. You know the play, okay? It was BS. They accused Donald Trump of a sexual assault. Once again, it's all BS, right? Trump is no saint. He's not he's not a perfect guy. He's actually in many ways, and you know, I say this in the past. It's probably not fair today, but I say lewd and lascivious, and this is literally about him saying like, you know, you grab the women by the hoo-hoosh. You know what I'm saying? Trump's been a lot better over the past 6 or 7 years, and this is one of the reasons why I chose to vote for him in 2020 and 2024. He's dramatically improved his behavior. He's been much calmer. And we all recognize this around 2022. One of the reasons why Ron DeSantis was doing so well was because people remembered that Trump was a bit boorish. And then when Trump came back to the stage to run for president, he did a pretty bang-up job. He was much calmer, much more reasonable. Well, there are still people who absolutely don't like him. And I mean, I guess that was always allowed, so long as what you don't like about him is grounded in fact. That's all I ask. Well, my friends, the SAVE Act is here, and rest assured, your American Congress will do nothing and waste your time and pretend like they're doing something while lying about what's really going on, covered up by the media, the corporate press. Indeed, my friends. I'm going to pick up my phone that I just dropped on the ground. The corporate press basically just covers up the fact that they're going to do nothing, and they're going to pretend like they're doing something. And only because of channels like this and independent podcasts has anyone actually ever figured out what's really going on. Now, the truth be told, there are very smart people for a long period of time, knew what was going on, and had these conversations about it, but you wouldn't get it on TV. So where are we currently at? Let me break it all down for you. The SAVE Act would save America, and Donald Trump wants it to happen, but it's not happening. It's not going to. You know what? I'm going to say this. Part of me does believe it is possible, but I bet against it. I would absolutely bet against it. I know that's probably, it's black pilly, but let me just stress. There is a good possibility this thing does pass because it is so massively popular that even with the obstruction, they might squeak it through. I really do think so. I think that's a slim possibility. But with Trump saying, I'm not going to sign any other bills until this gets through, they may amend it. So look at it like a big ask. They say, you got to prove who you are to vote. You need an ID to vote. Well, they go in, they amend it to add certain provisions, making it a lot easier to prove who you are. Because the Democrat complaints about this are that, like, married women wouldn't be allowed to vote. It's like, okay, we easily amend that. Like, that's just nonsense. You know what I mean? And then you still have a document requirement of any sort. And this means that voter in the park and, like, registration drives are seriously curtailed, tremendously benefiting, I say the Republicans, but it's not really about the Republican Party. It's about the American citizens. Right now, Democrats will just go out and register anybody to vote. And certainly there's the argument that everybody should vote, but if they want to. So here's what's going to happen. Right now, they voted 51-48 to begin debating the bill. Oh, wow. They debated whether they debate it, and then they voted to debate it. I'm not kidding. That's literally what happened. The argument from the right was that they should amend the rules of the Senate to get rid of the filibuster. No more filibuster. You just can't do it. 51 votes, bang, SAVE Act done, as is. Well, the media then spun a narrative along with the Republican establishment and said Republicans are demanding a talking filibuster. No, Republicans were saying they were going to change the rules of the Senate so that it would just pass with a simple majority. It's called the nuclear option. Well, the media changed the narrative so that most people only heard talking filibuster, which means Democrats can get up at the podium and debate by just talking for 20 hours until the session ends and then no one gets to vote on the bill. I think filibusters, in that sense, talking filibusters can be honorable in many capacities. We know that Rand Paul has and Ron Paul have done such things, trying to block war and these bad bills. So what they're doing now is they didn't do anything with the filibuster, and they're claiming it's going to go talking filibuster, but it's not. And then they're going to offer up amendments. It's going to be a long week. And then I think the ultimate end to this is that it fails. They have made attempts in the House to pass the SAFE Act over and over and over again, but Democrats largely oppose it, despite the fact that Democrat voters want it to happen. And the question is why? Well, I think it's actually pretty simple, my friends. I want you to imagine, just think about how stupid the average person is. Now realize half of them are stupider than that. It's a George Carlin quote. But if you are a hoity-toity prominent senator, you're looking at this saying, guys, people are really dumb. Okay, look at the conspiracy nonsense that appears on the social media, flat earthers. You think these people should vote? Well, to me, I think, yeah, you just need a robust fourth estate. You need a media apparatus that adequately informs the people so they can make adequate decisions. But you see, you have a sickly system where your media is crooked and corrupt slowly over a long enough period of time. And then you say, well, I guess our only hope, our only chance is to just manipulate elections through procedure so that we can maintain power because we are smarter than them. And we know it. And instead of actually asking the American people what they need and what they want and giving them the opportunity, they just say, give us the procedural power to manipulate the election so that we don't lose. And thus, my friends, here we are. Everybody's favorite Adam Schiff is back at it, talking about why the SAVE Act is bad, when in fact the SAVE Act is good, but let's listen, let's talk about it.
Which brings me to the so-called Save America Act. This legislation will not save anything about America.
It will.
But it will destroy something precious about this country.
Oh, are we not getting audio
it's
through?
Not meant to empower people to
For some reason, this is not going through.
determine the direction.
Okay, well, if it may be going through, but my monitor is showing that it's not coming through all that well.
Of the nation, but to deprive.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, well, let me just read it for you, and then I can figure out what's going on with my my audio input in a second. It may be going. The graphic may be busted. There's an audio tracker showing that it's not really working. Senator Adam Schiff breaks out into panic mode on the floor, crying the Save America Act will destroy something precious about this country. That precious thing is illegal voter fraud keeping Democrats in power. That is, guys, I'm sorry. I won't lie to you. That's not what I do. And I see so often with the Republicans, they either don't trust in your intelligence or they themselves are not correct. Voter fraud is not the issue. And perhaps it's because this is not I'm just going to put it like this. The Save America Act will require documentation before you can register to vote. This means that Democrat voter drives are over. This means that in order to register to vote, you have to go somewhere and prove who you are. This is going to be massively beneficial to this country because it means that there will be a minor hurdle for individuals to vote. Anybody already on the voter rolls will already be on the voter rolls, but anybody who wants to register new has to go and try. And so Democrats succeed largely by just showing up to bars and other places and being like, fill out this form. And then they take care of all the paperwork for you. And they knock on your door and they ballot harvest. This will do away with all of that. That's why Democrats don't want it. They know it is the end for them. But, I got to say this. It's pretty dang crazy because if we change the system, it just means that Democrats need only pander to actual Americans instead of wackaloon lefties who barely wanted to vote in the first place. Well, the reality is Adam Schiff knows that he has built a career on being a smarmy scumbag. And that means that he can only get votes from people who believe the lies that he's pushed. If this goes through, you may actually get a moderate and functional pro-America Democratic Party. That's why the machine of the Democratic Party does not want it. The Republicans, well, because largely the same. They don't like Donald Trump, and they didn't want him to win, and they don't like Thomas Massie, and they don't like Rand Paul. Donald Trump rags on them all the time because these guys are more interested in what their constituents and the people want than the donor class and the establishment infrastructure machine. So I think the SAVE Act would be tremendously great. But of course, we are trending towards, at least in my opinion, a return to the status quo. The machine state will regain control of the narrative. All this conspiratard stuff you see on social media is going to start getting ripped away. I want you to think about what it was like on social media It's really interesting because before social media, you had the Bush era where everybody had to support the war. You couldn't go on TV if you didn't, and they offered up only minor critiques, but it was really controlled opposition. Social media pops up, and then all of a sudden you start getting dissenting voices. You get the Ron Paul love revolution. You get Alex Jones. Well, they certainly took their time, but did away with these things. You know, for me, I was a young man, right? I'm in my early 20s into my late 20s throughout this period. But for these older folks, these people who are in their 40s, 50s, or older, a decade was was the blink of an eye. The system was put in place, and they have been slowly eroding at and chipping away at this populist movement. And now we're moving into an era of AI-generated noise on social media where independent channels like this are going to struggle to get any kind of real viewership against a backdrop of AI slop content. Then big companies will swoop in, begin investing in shows like this or others, putting them up on big network television, and deciding which voices are allowed to speak. And I think that's where we're going. My friends, the SAVE Act will save America. It will preserve so much of our integrity and our worldview that I believe it must be passed, but we'll see. Smash that like button, my friends. Share the show with everyone in your life. Join us at timcast.com. You can follow me on X and Instagram at Timcast. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all in the next segment.